We're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Spill the Kopi with me, CuddlyBossLady. And we've reached November. It's gone by really quickly. And today we have Sadiq, who is Osaki brother. I keep calling you Sadiq. Sorry.
It's okay, no problem.
I need more coffee at this rate. So welcome to our show today. We are basically going to be talking about mental health and athletes and those who are active as well. And psychology, November. Yeah, none of the moon number, no shaving for the whole month of November for men. That's not obviously my department. Thank goodness. But yes, let's start by talking a little bit obviously about yourself and basically your journey towards this area, and not just the geographical area, but your area of expertise, basically.
Okay, well, Assalamualaikum, selamat petang. Thank you for having me, Cuddly Boss Lady. So yeah, my name is Muhammad Deen. I'm actually from England. Born in 1991. Raised.
You don't have to go in like that much of a journey. My mom and dad met in, whatever now.
That part boy, I don't even know how they met. Born, raised, studied in the UK, bachelor's in sports psychology. And then I was working at the time, then I did my master's in sport and exercise psychology. And that was just assignment based. And as it got time towards doing the research project towards the end, I collaborated with the National Sports Institute of Malaysia. So I had come to Malaysia, did the project with them, went back to the UK, did a bit more work in all kinds of jobs, really not related to my field at all. And then got a call back in 2017 to come to Malaysia again, just before the SEA Games, again with ISN. Then I was there for 1.5 years. And by that point, I'd sort of set up my own consultancy. Then I was kind of like a bit back and forth, looking for opportunities, and company started doing well. And I'm still here now in Malaysia. So yeah, that's my background in sports psychology. In a nutshell, yeah. And started a PhD, which I'm still doing. So yes.
Oh, well, forever learning, as they say, which makes it, that's good. I mean, but what attracted you to sports psychology in the first place? I mean, I can understand, a lot of times sports medicine and the different aspects, but what attracted you to sports psychology?
Okay, I think that my initial attraction to sports psychology probably came from me always being sporty anyway. So I did all kinds of sports when I was young, like football, cricket, rugby, pool, snooker. Squash was the main one for a while. And then I got to sort of state level in squash. Wasn't really finding it that appetizing. Took up boxing, and then I went into badminton. And badminton where I found my real passion there. And what I found was in the junior ranks, I really improved really quick. Like I started really late, but then got to a very good position very fast. And then as soon as it came to like go from the junior to the senior part, where we started playing against like grown people, I found that quite difficult because the standard was just so far, And then that's when I really understood like the mental aspects of the game, because really sport's still the same. Yes, they're better opponents, but for me, that's when the mental aspect became really, really clear. So when I was looking at kind of studying, and I came across sports psychology course, I was like, okay, this is it now. This is definitely something which I'm very, very interested in. So it came really from my own experiences playing sport, where I actually started to value the psychological side. And I think that, anyone who is kind of involved in any level of sport will actually say, what, the mental kind of side of it is probably the most important.
Because, I mean, a lot of times you would all put the training in. Yeah, more or less the same. I mean, more or less, right? And, it can really set you apart. Your mental strength or the resilience or the determination aspect of it, or how you deal if you don't hit your target or you don't, doing something like that, also gets into play, right? Because not everyone can win all the time. no matter what level. I mean, whatever level you are, it's generally speaking, not entirely, you know, it's not human. No, but you know, it's unusual to. Everyone has been through defeat, as it were, and
Yep.
how they react to that or how they deal with that. But I
Yep.
mean, we've seen a growing, I think, importance emphasized on sports psychology and or the mental health of not just up
Mm.
and coming athletes, but also athletes towards their retirement or after they retire,
Yep.
um, and the different aspects of that. And what do you think? Uh, there's a growing interest in, you know, the mental health slash sports psychology aspect these days.
Okay. So basically, when it comes to sports psychology as a discipline, we are actually quite far behind compared to other sports science disciplines. So when we think about sports science, we normally think about strength and conditioning. We think about sports nutrition. We think about massage, physio,
Yeah,
sports therapy, all of these kind of things. And these kind of fields are pretty well established. Sports psychology for a long time has really been misunderstood. I'm talking for the last like 40 years, because even within our own field, we have been arguing left, right, and center about what it is we actually do or what we should be doing. It's still going on to this day. I'm not joking. Like a physio is a physio, no matter where you are. But a sports psychologist, if you throw a rock in a different country, you'll get a different response. And this has caused a lot of issues over the past.
right.
So that's where you get mental skills trainers, you get mental coaches, you got gurus, and all the different kind of labels coming up. So when sports psychology was kind of being established, people kind of noticed, actually, you know what, the psychological side is really, really important. How do we know we're getting the right person to do the right part of the job? So this
Right.
was actually quite difficult to establish in the first place. And then what sports psychologists kind of came in saying, they were kind of saying, actually, you know what, we should do specific mental skills training just based at performance. So it's kind of like, okay, if you're a performer, what you should be doing is you should be setting the right kind of targets. That's the psychological aspect. What you should be doing is seeing the right kind of images before your performance. What you should be doing is saying the right things to yourself before your performance. Everything was performance, performance, performance. And we made some headway in that, definitely. But we're still not really hitting the nail on the head. And over the last sort of few years, across the general public, even outside of sports, mental health is getting lots and lots of attention. I think that people are just more open about it now, and which is a wonderful conversation that we're having. And I think sports psychologists kind of looked at it and said, you know what, maybe we've been doing our job wrong the whole time.
Need to.
We've
It
only,
should
we've,
evolve, right? I mean,
yes,
even
yes,
in.
yes,
So I mean, it's true that, like you were saying, you know, more and more attention is being paid, more so over this last year,
yep,
because this is the time, whether it's fortunate, unfortunate, depending on your perspective, that we are forced to take a closer look at our approaches and things like that.
yeah,
But okay, let's say we're talking about what would a role be if the team says, okay, we're going to bring in a sports psychologist.
yeah.
What, or like you're saying, you know, is it performance only? Does it, you know, what would generally be your role?
Yeah, this is a great question, because this is really where my field needs to pay particular attention to. So if someone was to call me up today and says, you know what, Mohammed, I'm thinking about hiring you as a sports psychologist, but I need to know what exactly you do first before I can consider it. I would just say, you know what, my role has three kind of aspects to it. The first one being performance, because at the end of the day, sports organizations, they want their performance to get better. That's always going to be the main objective. Yeah. So that's the first area I'd look at. The second area is look at the mental health and well-being, because at the end of the day, athletes are human beings,
Yeah.
so they're gonna need that kind of support regardless. Just like every one of us needs that kind of support. And the third part would be on the personal development side. So kind of what kind of people are athletes turning into, making them better communicators, making them better leaders, developing their resilience, helping them transition from different phases of their life. Like you said, the kind of post-retirement is a big transition, how they become coaches, that kind of thing. So those would be the three areas that I would basically pitch towards any kind of organization. And that would kind of let them know these are the kind of three areas that I work in. So any kind of psychological support will be within these three areas. And I think, like before, what I was saying is sports psychologists just say performance, 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 and they neglect these other two really, really big sides about mental health and developing the athletes as people. And now the International Society for Sports Psychology, they're kind of putting their foot down a little bit on this. They're just saying psychologists across the whole world, we need to be considering mental health at every stage, before competitions, during competitions, after competitions, from the junior level to the senior level, in para sports, in able body sports, across the whole board, we need to be considering mental health all of the time.
Because it's such a huge component, as you were saying earlier, it is such a huge
Yep.
component of somebody, a person, whether you are, like you said, at the early start of your career, sporting career, or towards the end, or if you are a fitness or a masters athlete as well. And it's interesting, that now more and more. Yeah, I'm sorry about the drilling, and that again. They seem to wait till this time to start. They want to be in on the action, so nah. Shh. Yeah, so with the increased awareness of the not just one aspect, not just the performance based. How would you? I mean, the transition to considering the other two. I mean, this also applies not just to the athlete themselves, but the support network around the athlete, whether it's a parent, whether it's the coaches, and all of those. Because yes, it obviously primary focus would be an athlete, but the support network around the athlete, which the sports psychologist would be considered, right, part of that support network. What would be some of the, well, I don't want to start straight into the whole negative thing, but what are some of the things that you've observed is a common factor where would send, not say warning bells. I mean, it sounds kind of slightly dramatic there, but let's say a coach has noticed certain things from an athlete, and they would come and talk to you about it. How would you? I know it's very vague, right there, but usually there are sometimes certain trick. I hate using the word trick. Yeah, red flags. That's the word I was thinking. That would, you as a coach who knows there's or you as a sports psychologist who's working with the team on a regular basis, you have, what sort of things would something you would look out for in terms of a person or an athlete?
Okay, so it's a great question. So basically what I've understood from that is when we're considering mental health in our subjects as basically athletes as a support team, what kind of things are we looking out for? What kind of things should we be paying attention to when we're discussing the mental health? So have I got that right?
I think so. And it was a convoluted approach, but yes.
No, it's fine.
I blame the drilling. Right. That's what it is. No.
No problem. So I mean, when we talk about, I think probably I'll answer that question in a little while, but I'll just try to set the scene first. For mental health itself, across the whole board, across sports, across the public, obviously now we're kind of getting the reports that stress and anxiety and depression, the rates are like 30-40%. That's what they say. So basically saying out of 10 people, 3 or 4 will have kind of periods in their life where they're suffering from some kind of mental health issues or they're going towards mental illness. What I personally feel about that is, I personally feel that number is way less than the actual truth. I think it's closer to basically 100% because we all have periods in our lives which are not the best, and we do struggle where maybe when we lose hope, maybe when we're thinking so much, maybe when we're chronically stressed, like we're losing weight and that kind of thing. So these numbers, first of all, are underreported. That's my kind of stance on it. So what I would always say is you've got to have that kind of mindset, basically thinking that, these things are everywhere already and they always have been there. This is not a new thing just coming up. These things have always been present. Okay. And from there, we need to appreciate as well, and depending on what kind of culture you're in, is that human beings are so good at hiding. They are so good at protecting their symptoms. They're unbelievably good at it. Seriously, very, very good.
Because I mean,
Mm,
that's why unfortunately we've lost, our swimming world has lost two young athletes in the last I'll say year. And like you said, you don't necessarily see the signs because
yes,
you know
you won't.
I mean we have seen, they could be really jovial, they could be the
Yep.
that, but uh so like I said, it's you can never 100% predict, everyone, like you said, the actor, the facade that people like to put up. But other is, yeah. So, Karen, just pointing that out.
No, no. But I think that's the kind of approach that we need to have. We need to have that mindset, just that we can't look at people and say, oh, they look fine. We need to have that kind of mindset and approach that this person could be struggling right now. They could be struggling for weeks, for months, and we don't know.
Yep.
So when we have this kind of unbiased, this kind of curiosity towards it, this kind of non-judgmental approach, we're probably going to get closer to actually finding out what's actually going on, because we're actually looking for these things in the first place. So that'd probably be the good place to start. The second kind of place to go is trying to notice any changes in behavior, whatever that may be. So, for example, if I was a coach, and this is all subjective, by the way, but we're all subjective, and we use our subjective opinions all of the time. If I was a coach and I have an athlete that comes to training 20 minutes early, and they've done that for the last 6 months, and then all of a sudden they're late once, and then they go back to being early, and then they're late again, and they're late again, and late again. That for me would kind of be like, okay, there might be a conversation which needs to be held, not necessarily a disciplinary one, but like, what's going on? Are you okay? How are you doing? Or, coach, I'm kind of waking up a little bit late. I'm quite tired. Okay, what's happening? You're not sleeping so well? No, actually, it's quite difficult for me to get to sleep. And then that kind of conversation, you probably might get closer to the source of some kind of level of stress, or maybe even some anxiety or some concerns going on. But that only came from noticing, this athlete's just come to training late. So those are the
Right.
kind of things you look out for. You look out for people who are kind of avoiding public settings from time to time. You'd look out for certain outbursts, or you'd look out for any kind of changes in behavior. That would be the number one place to start.
I mean, as a coach, you would be one of those that spends the most amount of time
Yeah.
in with these, I'll say, kids, with these athletes and all this, and sometimes from
Mm.
young upwards, right? You would have seen that. And I think one of the key things is that you said is having conversations that with not necessarily to discipline, but having an actual conversation. How you doing? All right,
Yeah.
we've noticed this. That kind of thing. And I know it's not always the case for many coaches or those around them. And it can be a simple it can be a simple conversation. It can doesn't necessarily have to be a face-to-face one.
Yeah.
uh, Obviously these days less of the face-to-face stuff,
Yeah.
but it could be a simple something as simple as, okay, we've kind of noticed this, how are things, or it
Yeah.
depends on how well you know that. But yeah, having conversations and being observant of, like you were saying,
Yeah.
changes in behavioral changes,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they won't necessarily tell you, right? Like,
But they
oh,
might show you.
coach, yeah, they'll show you in other ways.
Show you. Yeah.
Implied. Um, oh yeah, implied. I'm running out of words today. Oh dear. Drink more coffee. But yeah, I think I. Yeah, it's the idea of having a conversation, especially if you have a huge team or a club to different
Yeah.
levels to work with.
Yep.
But I remember at one of the webinars that they did earlier this year, they
Mm.
talked about oh god, what's his name? Okay, I can't remember the name. Oh my god, I'm terrible today. But he mentioned that
Really.
what he and his team, as in a team of coaches, did
Mm.
is they would always have a conversation about their service. Has anyone else noticed? Because it doesn't it may not necessarily be the ones closest, because you don't always notice changes because you're
No,
always with them or anything like that. And that's why
that's
you were
right.
saying having a fresh set of eyes, if you like, or someone
Yes.
who will notice certain things. So that's why he always had conversation with his coaches as
Yep.
well. That they said, "Hey, I've noticed a bit of this," like one of the assistants had said, and then they'll have the conversation, and then if it requires further out of, then they would bring it to uh, a sports psychologist, and then they work together. I mean, the idea is everyone's supposed to work together to ensure that this sort of thing happens. But do you
Yep.
find that because I'm going to be sweeping generalization about Asian culture in society is less of the idea of having a conversation like this, the less of the talking about emotions and
Yep.
you know what am I really feeling, and
Yep.
um, I think that's been a conversation that is starting to happen, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
do you think that's a huge element? I mean, you've been here a longer period of time as well, and you know,
Yep. It's interesting for me to answer this question as well as a British person, because obviously I'm not white. So my parents are from East Africa, and my original descent is Punjabi. So when we talk about cultures, I've got a massive cultural mix, and then I've moved to Malaysia and I've settled here. So when I kind of look at it with all of that kind of perspective, the most basic thing to say is humans are humans regardless of where they're from. So they all have that kind of needs, and I think that yes, we definitely need to connect to people more. That's something that helps us survive. It's something that helps us with our motivation. It's something that helps us with our expression and having a sense of belonging somewhere. And I think that in certain cultures, regardless of where it is, because this might happen in the West, it might happen in Africa, it can happen anywhere really. Again, like I said, we might not want to project those kind of things that, oh, I'm weak or I'm suffering. And, we'd have very good reasons for not expressing those kind of things out. Maybe, if I have an outburst, then maybe coach won't pick me for a match that's coming up or for a competition. We don't want to show those kind of things. So it's interesting how coaches play, but also coaches within certain organizations make a big difference as well. So say you're in Malaysia and say you've got national sporting associations and you've got little league clubs and you've got amateur associations. Yes, there could be a Malaysian culture, but there's various coaches here as well, and then there's various coaches within those organizations as well. So it's really context dependent. What I kind of feel in general is human beings are less likely to open up about it unless they feel very, very comfortable around the people that they're with. So what can we actually do to kind of make these conversations happen in the first place is being the kind of people that people will want to talk to. That's a real key. So like what you said, we need to have conversations. Yes, we need to have conversations, but we need to be the kind of people who can have conversations. So it's like if I'm someone who easily gets angered, do you think that I'm the kind of person that
yeah,
someone
that
would
is
want to
going
open
to
up to?
talk to. Yeah, be like, oh,
Yeah,
maybe that's why sometimes they don't notice the signs because
yeah,
or the athlete is like, no, I can't, I can't talk. You might yell at me, you know,
yeah.
this, and I don't
Might
want to be
not
yelled at again.
understand. Yeah, and if you think about it, Leah, you think to yourself just for 10 seconds, who is the best person in your whole life that you can always talk to? You don't need to say the name, but just think of that person, or whoever 5 people they are, and you'd there'd be a certain characteristic in there which you'd have in common with me. It'd be that the person is non-judgmental. They wouldn't try to push you into doing something that you didn't want to do. They definitely understand the world from your perspective. They probably know your characteristics, and they'd probably try and, if they were to give you advice, they'd give you advice based on what your values are. And if we're in sporting associations or if we're in clubs where people don't get us like that, or they're not approachable like that, or they're not they're not non-judgmental like that, then why would we want to talk to people around us?
Yeah, I'd
We probably
rather
wouldn't, right?
keep it to, yeah. I mean, it's what someone was saying, it just takes one person.
Yeah,
And that's what I learned from this seminar. And he was saying that, but the thing is, like you were saying, the assistant coach had
yep,
no qualms in going to the head coach and saying, "Oh, well, I've noticed something about
yeah.
one of your swimmers that I have, gives me a little bit of
I've got
pause."
concerns over your swimmer. Yeah,
Yeah, and like you said, the conversation, they felt that they could do that, as
yeah,
opposed to I am head coach and I am this,
yeah,
or vice versa.
yeah,
I think, I don't know if a lot of times, I keep coming back to society and culture, is a person
yeah,
of authority. You don't necessarily have uh, a conversation of such nature with someone of authority,
yeah,
or you I don't want to be bothered, or I don't want to be, if I
yeah.
say something and, oh, coach doesn't pick me for this, or or maybe my teammates might make fun of me, or what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It's
there's power distance, isn't it? Like there's all kind of barriers that kind of stop people from communicating this with others. And if we look at the recent literature, they call it PIE now, PIE, which would be like a psychologically informed environment, or PSE, psychologically safe environment, where a lot of the research is pointing towards this now. It's sort of thinking about how can we create those kind of cultures where people can be more open with each other, and it's not necessarily mean that this is like a group full of people that cry, or those kind of things, or that they're just sharing their emotional issues and not progressing anywhere. It's not about that, because for sport organizations, at the end of the day, they want their athletes to perform. They want the athletes to perform, and the athletes want to perform. That's
yeah,
why the athletes, they want to perform. But it's just that when the mental health comes into a bit of a crisis, or they're kind of seeping into that kind of territory, do they have people around them that they can talk to? And that's basically the main point of it. Or, do they have that support network in place? Who do I turn to if I have this kind of issue? Is there something structured that I can feel secure in? So that's kind of where the research is pointing to, and I think across the whole world is moving towards that. Yeah,
because you can't, yeah, it would be like you said, the whole idea of a group. If you yell at, I'm not saying yell, if you say to a swimmer in front of the whole team, right, what's up with you, kind of situation, or why are you doing that? Yeah, not really the ideal situation to uh, really find out what's going on, right? No one's
that's an
going to be
interesting way of
like,
getting someone to open up. Hey, what's up with you?
yeah, it's not really, um, it obviously, it's, like you said, depends on context and what's going on. But one of the questions I in the stream from Linny, um, yeah, I remember those. That's the Asian thing. Have you ever had to actually talk to, I assume, parents, not necessarily, I guess, on behalf of the athlete? I think that's what she means. But
Have I ever had to talk to a parent who looks like they're abusing their kids? Was that basically the question?
well,
Have you ever had to talk to marks on their legs? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your friends, Linny.
we're from a different generation of, yeah,
I think I'm in
yes.
that generation with you, Linny.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes.
Have I
Um,
ever had a talk with parents? Yes, I have. You have had a talk, but you can't tell people how to basically be parents. And I think if there's clear signs of abuse, then you need to kind of find the appropriate channels. You got to be, if people are coming into training with marks on their legs, and if you do suspect it's abuse, you got to pursue that with the relevant authorities, whoever that may be, wherever you're from. You got to get educated on that. But yes, have definitely spoken with parents and coaches about the mental health of their charges. It's a common conversation. Yeah, it crops up a lot more than you think. because naturally we want, we'd always want to push and challenge athletes, but we don't want to overwhelm them. We've got to find the big balance. How can I challenge this individual without overwhelming them?
Because balance is the hard one to find, I think,
It is.
a lot of times, because sometimes you need to push. You need to know when to push, okay, we'll just take a little step back, and sometimes when you do push, you find out a lot of things as well. I think
Yes.
that helps. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of the marks on the legs, I've never come across a case like that where a child being physically abused by the parent, and then I've had to kind of step in. But conversation with parents is a very common one.
Do you find
Especially around
it a
there.
very I don't know whether, I mean, coming from a parent point of view, whether denial first before all else. I don't know. I mean, it would be
I mean,
difficult.
who wants to be told how to raise their kids?
Some
Who wants
people
to be
like
told?
knowing that. Okay. Um, but yeah, it's a challenging time, I think, for some people need it.
Yeah, it
Let's
is.
yeah, it's a tough one.
It's very, very challenging. You got to read that specific situation, and naturally, when you're trying to build any kind of realistic working relationship with people, there's got to be trust there. There's got to be some rapport there, and then you've got to approach that situation however it needs to be approached. Because sometimes, parents are really pushy, and it's not just like they abuse the children in a physical manner. Verbal abuse, emotional abuse. Sometimes that's the worst part of youth sports. Actually, is the parents. Just to be honest,
It's
the
like,
research is clear on this. Pushy
projecting.
parents. Yeah, it's just like, oh, I wasn't an athlete when I was growing up, but now I've got kids and I'm gonna make them athletes, and then they kind of,
Or they were athletes before but didn't get to where they thought they would be, and then
yeah,
it carries on.
yeah. That's very common. That's very common. It's just like,
Well, it's very common in
be aware
theater and
and
school,
everything.
and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um,
But
I mean,
psychologists need to build a connection with the parents for sure, and then you try to work together. You'll always try to work together and do your bits.
it's the network around the athlete, isn't it,
Yeah.
that you need to look at as well, because you need to. Well, this is me assuming. Okay, you would need to look at the various aspects that influence that particular athlete, and where maybe some of the concerns or issues are coming from. Right, trying to identify um, what, yeah, well, what triggers the kid to do something or not do something, or uh, whether they're getting the support that they need when they need it as
Yeah.
well. I mean, coming into, um, you know, obviously coaches and parents, but coaches would work ideally hand in hand with sports psychologists that are on their team.
Yeah.
And have you, I mean, I remember, like, I keep coming back to this webinar because it's very interesting. And they had mentioned that they had done a little reading, like learning on their own, some aspects of the sports psychology. Obviously, not to the level of being professional, the whole shebang, but
Mm-hmm.
certain things that maybe they figured would help them as coaches.
Yeah.
The aspects that relating to coaching, obviously, and that. I mean, do you think? I mean, it would be difficult having a coach who is also a sports psychologist, because you can't separate that. I don't know. What do you think? I mean,
It's a good question. I mean, I think if we look at the science of the disciplines themselves, I think that might help us to solve the question. So, if you look at what a psychologist does, psychologist is there to help people, and a psychologist is a form of coach. Is always going to be some kind of coach. Even if in a general setting you go to see a therapist, they're trying to teach you how to get better at controlling your emotions, teach you how to be more self-aware, teach you how to take control of your life, and the kind of things that you want. And if you look at coaching is still in that educational role, and as a figure of support, someone with knowledge, someone who can understand you, someone who can help you solve problems. So the roles are similar in that aspect. If coaches are psychologists, then that's great, and if psychologists are coaches as well, that's great, because coaching itself has a lot of psychology in it. There's a lot of emotional support involved in there. There's nothing wrong with the two being married together. And I think that if a coach uses a psychologist and a psychologist uses a coach, that kind of relationship needs to work both ways, and they kind of need to complement each other, understand what each other do, so they can help their respective athletes. But coaches normally, if especially like really world-class coaches, they've got so much psychological content within them. They kind of know what to say and when, and they have a good understanding as well of how to get the best out of the people around them. And that's all what psychologists want as well. So coaches normally are quite good at this kind of thing. It's just that sometimes where a specific time and setting where you might need someone with a certain expertise or someone to bring a different kind of idea in, that's all it is.
That's good.
So, yeah.
Because I mean, sometimes some coaches would be like, "Oh, we're not trained as a sports psychologist, so we won't deal with that, any of that." And sometimes I think that, like you were saying, it's an important element of being a coach. You can't say, "I'm only there to. This is training in. After that, that's it. I don't care, right? So long as you you performance, right? This is what you do, and tend to brush off the whole idea of having some psychology knowledge, if you like. Being aware of that, not necessarily, like you said, to the level of unless they really want to, of course. But being aware, I think awareness is a very, and being educated about things themselves, I think that's a huge component. Lindsay has a question. Hello, Lindsay. Lindsay is really awesome. She's cool. She's one of my teammates. She's asking, once you've assisted an athlete identify an issue, how do you help the athlete make a change? That's your question.
Once you have assisted the athlete to identify an issue, how do you support to help the athlete make a change? Well, Lindsay, that really depends on the context within which a sports psychologist operates. Some sports psychologists are quite deep within their settings, and some are more of external consultants. So, for example, how would it be identified in the first place? Where either psychologist talks to an athlete directly, or maybe it comes across the psychologist where the coach has made a referral to the psychologist. So you'd kind of look for the main kind of the case formulation per se. It's kind of like, what's going on? Why is this happening? What have you tried to do to solve? And which direction are you heading at the moment? Then between the psychologist and the athlete themselves, what they try to do is they try to work out some pretty clear and consistent goals that come to an agreement. And then from there, basically what they would do is they would set out kind of a strategic plan, which might involve therapy, it might involve mental skills training. My kind of line of work would be on the therapeutic lines, and I'd use the form of what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. So cognitive behavioral therapy is a big family of therapies. I'd probably look at using one of those, making sure that the athlete understands what is involved in the therapy and what they're expected and what's expected of me. And then you've kind of had regular meetings from there, and then you track the progress until you're kind of both at a point where you're saying, look, you're happy with what you've achieved, and then take it from there and see whether there's anything else to work on. And that's pretty much how all psychological coaching works across the board for everything. In any kind of field, it works exactly like that.
Because each situation would have, you would be given a set of tools and certain aspects to work with, and you got to adjust it accordingly, right?
You do. And I think it's important about Lindsay's question as well, is like, how do you support the athlete to make a change? It's interesting, well, because as a psychologist, you might have a different perception to the athlete. And I think it's really important that you try to get on the same page. You say, this is what I think the focus is. And if the athlete buys into that, or the athlete wants to give you more information, because really they're the experts. We might be experts in psychology, but they're the experts on themselves. When you try and get on the same page, then you can set your targets together and then just monitor how that goes. That could be by a range of methods, but yeah, it's up to them how they decide to do that. But yeah, it would normally involve psychological sessions, maybe individual work where you kind of meet up one-to-one, maybe once or twice a week, once every 2 weeks. It could be a case where a psychologist is down in training or going to them with competitions, just spending time with them and just having conversations with them. Really, that would be the way that you'd help the athletes make a change. But I think it's really important that they're both on the same kind of page when it comes to that.
What would be, I mean, working with individuals versus like individual sports versus team sports, and is that different in any way, or would you do
Individual versus team sports? What would consist of like an individual sport? Are we talking like shooting or that kind of thing?
swimming, which is one of
Swimming.
these weird, it's individual, but is some team things happening too.
Yeah,
So
that's why it's difficult. It's difficult to separate the individual and team sports concept per se, because even if you're an individual, you're still always in a team. Let's say you're a singles tennis player. You'd still be in a team of other singles tennis players. And if you're a football player, it's like you can only perform as part of a team. So I guess it depends on the event, right?
yeah,
So if it depends on your approach. If you're just on a performance-based approach, individual sports like we said, like for swimming, might have a certain set of psychological skills needed for that sport. So you channel your support service towards that. Where in a team, where there's tactical things, where there's communication things going on, where there's big parts on their kind of their unity and their identity and how they function and how they communicate with each other, then the kind of work that you would do should be focusing on that as well. But if there are individuals in the team who need individualized support services, then you should be doing that as well.
okay. What are the more common issues that you would be facing in your line of work?
Oh, the number one issue without a doubt is I'm not confident. That is the number one. Everyone is so hungry for confidence. It's like, give me more. I want it. I want it. There's a very common phrase that we kind of use in sports psychology to say that if you could sell confidence in a pill, it would be the number one selling pill on the planet.
Yeah, that's true.
He was so desperate for confidence. I'm not confident.
Self-doubt is a
Yeah,
great
yeah,
stumbling block for, I mean,
yeah,
in general, right? As a human
yeah.
characteristic.
Yeah, and that kind of like, oh, I'm great in training, but why can't I perform in competitions? That's again related to the confidence. Confidence is definitely a big one. But I feel like the more kind of involved that I'm getting into sports psychology and the way that my understanding of sports psychology has changed, dealing with stress is a big one. For athletes to be performers, there's high levels of stress, and can be a very good thing. No, no, make no mistake about that. Stress can be a very good thing. Stress is very good for getting the best out of us, but there's a tipping point where it becomes too much. And
It becomes anxiety, and like you said,
yeah,
it's if they can channel that stress
yeah,
appropriately, then
yeah,
it can be used to an advantage. But yeah,
yeah,
the tipping point where it
yeah,
becomes the opposite
yeah, yeah.
would be the any other common issues that, I mean, obviously, like you said, the
Com-
confidence and self-doubt is the
yeah, communication with teammates is a big one. That's definitely a big one that I've worked on. And yeah, just sometimes just trying to keep motivation levels high. These kind of seem to be the most common issues per se in sports psychology. Probably wouldn't really use issue, but those are the kind of things that we focus on more. But for me, my approach to psychological coaching as well is a bit different, because a lot of people just say, "Oh, you know what? You should only go to see a psychologist if you have a problem." I
not
don't like this
necessarily.
approach. No, I don't like this approach, because at the end of the day, you don't go into as an athlete, you don't start to do take care of your body if you're injured, or you don't go into the gym when you feel physically weak. You go to the gym regularly because you need to upkeep your physical fitness. And for me, for psychological coaching, or for a psychologist to do their job, is just about keeping your mind fresh. It's more about getting your mind into the best position rather than, oh, I don't want my mind to be in the worst position. I want
Okay,
to get
that's
close to
true.
100, not avoid being at zero. So for me, I kind of feel like, you know what, everyone can do with a bit of psychological coaching. You know, even a world number one is still always developing something. So, you know, why
I
not
mean,
look at sharpening the mental side?
we talked about the idea of society, and sometimes, and especially, I think, still in Asia, although more and more of the conversation is happening, is there's a stigma like, oh, you're going to a psychologist. Oh, what's wrong with you? You know, it's
Yeah,
or a therapist, or they're like, it's a taboo thing. It's you can't. It's like, oh, or it's, bring shame onto the family. Kind of. Okay, that's a slightly extreme version, but
it's not extreme. It's not. It's very real.
it's unfortunately, although the conversation about this is
Yeah,
obviously happening, uh,
yeah.
thankfully. Yes. Well, I am, doing all the things that I do. Yes, my mum still says that sometimes. You're crazy, do all these things. I'm like, yeah, well, it's fun. Um, and yeah, so how, obviously that's something that, from a professional point of view as well,
Yeah.
is to get, how do you get past that, I'll call it a stumbling block, and also the same for, if let's say a coach or someone has asked you to work with this athlete, the athlete themselves may also have this perception, and or like I said, you also look at their support network, and how do you work past that? I mean,
Okay, so basically, this kind of touches on nicely what we were talking about half an hour ago, where we're talking about, people have very good reasons for wanting to look tough, without a doubt, and this is relates to what we call stigma or taboo. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't need to see anyone. I'm fine, and I can understand that totally. I 100% understand that. We want to have control, and we want to present ourselves in a certain way, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, we're getting closer and closer and closer in society to normalizing this kind of conversation. And as a profession as well, we have not done enough. The sports psychology has not done enough to get ourselves to the level where it's normalized. Like I said before,
when
we're
no
still,
one thinks twice about, okay,
yeah, it's just like,
you need
oh,
to
you
go
you have
and
a sports team, yeah. It's like you have a sports team and you don't have a psychologist. What's wrong with you? You need one. Like, we're not at that level yet.
no.
Strength and conditioning are there, masseur is there, physio is there, nutrition is there. Sports psychology, we're way behind. So actually, as a profession, we need to do more. That's number one. Number two, the conversations around mental health and psychological factors of performance, they're becoming very, very normalized anyway. So we're getting closer towards that. Whether it's a specific thing in a culture, I'm not particularly sure, because I think this is across the whole world. I just think that in some cultures, maybe it's just more established than others. Like, for example, in the West, sports psychology is quite well established. In some countries in the East, it's quite well established, but it's just not everywhere yet. So, some are a bit more ahead of the others, but I think it's moving in the right direction anyway.
Well, which is good. I mean, because I find that, um, like you said, the conversation is happening more and
Yes.
more. Whereas maybe
Yes.
even the decade ago, the idea of having uh, someone on board as a sports psychologist or general, and they'd be like, "Why? Why? What's wrong? Cannot. I'm fine. I'm not crazy. What are you talking about?"
Yeah,
It's evolving slowly.
it
Um,
is. And credit to people like Michael Phelps as well.
the documentary
There's
that yeah, did you?
so many interviews he's done. I haven't seen a particular documentary. What documentary is that?
He did a documentary on, well, obviously his own journey as an
Mm.
incredible athlete, but he talked
Mm.
about the mental health aspects
Oh yeah.
and what he had to deal with, and
Mm.
what's her name, Allison, can't pronounce the second name. So also a top level athlete who was very open about her own struggles with what was happening, and so that brings out, wow, conversation. More people talk about it, especially if they're brings people attention to the
Yes.
right way. So
Yeah.
celebrity and fame can be useful in some respects.
Yeah.
Um,
They've driven the conversation forward without a doubt. Like, because there's no one who can really question someone like Michael Phelps, or even what was his name? Sorry, Allison.
Alison, I will look up her name, and I cannot spell it or pronounce it because it's
Yeah.
European.
And they're just one of many, many examples across the world in all kinds of different sports. There's so many we could name. So, I mean, credit to them for being open and honest and bringing about their stories, because it's just showing you the reality. People might look at Michael and go, oh, wow, he's so strong and he's so tough and he's invincible. We actually realize how strong and tough he's had to be when he's had all of these other things going on, and, problems with in and out of the sport, and then DUIs and all kinds of stuff going on, and still managing to churn out the medals. But it's just showing the more human side of it. Is actually that's what's really normalizing the conversation, that we actually realize actually it doesn't matter what level you're at, these issues can still come about, because you can never take the human
Oh,
out
there she.
of
Yep.
the
Schmidt.
athlete.
Schmidt. Is that how you say
Yeah,
it? Yeah. They've driven this conversation. It was a big thing for Alison. I remember a few years ago that how much she struggled with it,
yeah,
which is good. Um, and also there were there was loads of stuff now that started coming out, and they talk about especially as male athletes or male, um, because traditionally you may not necessarily talk or have the conversations that are needed to at least like you said, Michael Phelps talks about, you know uh, I struggle with this stuff, because I got to be a
yeah,
big tough man, and um, the facade that you had to continue to do that, right?
yeah,
I mean, when would I suppose an athlete seek, uh, you know, uh, your professional help, or you mentioned the regularity of that kind of help would
yeah,
depend on the situation. If
yeah.
you, yeah,
So when should an athlete kind of
come and
look
see
to
you,
consult a sports
basically. Yeah,
psychologist? It's a really, really good question, and it's one that has no definitive answer, because I think a lot of it has to do with what I mentioned about 5 minutes ago about our position as a profession. Because if we were at the right level, it would be a lot easier with less barriers. So, like I said, people still have that perception. When I've got a real issue which I can't solve, I'll go and seek out a psychologist, which is totally understandable. But it really depends on the individual. But you got to do it when you feel comfortable. So for some individuals, like Sir Chris Hoy, as the cyclist from Great Britain, he was at the top of his game, and he was going into the Athens Olympics, I think, and he was just sort of saying, "Look, I want to go see a sports psychologist, so that I know before the Olympics I have done absolutely every single thing that I can." Not because he
every
had a particular
aspect.
issue. Yeah, he's just like, there's no stone left unturned. Like, I've done everything. I've checked the bike. I've done my nutrition bits. I've done my bits with conditioning. I've done my bits on the tactical side. I've done absolutely everything, and I do the psychological as well. So that's how he looked at it. For some other individuals, they would just kind of be like, I'm kind of stuck in a problem right now, which I can't get out of. Only then I would do it. So it really, really depends. But for me, I would always say, look, I think that most of the time, if you go to the right person, good things should come about of it. Maybe you'll learn a bit more about yourself. Maybe you'll develop some strategies for controlling your emotions. Maybe you'll get a bit more direction in your life. I would always say that try to do it as early as possible, because I think the earlier you do anything, the better it's always going to be. I'd always say that the later it is, then the worse it's going to be. So
You
as
have a lot
early as
more
possible.
things to work through as opposed to
Yeah, a lot more to
learning to
work
have
with.
the conversation early on or
Yeah, and it
identifying.
depends. It depends who's available as well, Leah, because, like, for example, for some teams they already have psychologists who you can just literally just talk to any time of the day. Even, like, for example, you might just say hi and bye to them, and
Yeah,
then just like 4 weeks later, oh, by the way, I want to talk to you about something. Okay, fine. So it depends. It depends who's around you as well. But look for people around you. Know where they are.
yeah. I mean, conversation. That's always a we keep coming back to that idea
Yes.
of that. Before we move on to perhaps the mental health and athletes, especially during this present time, I think someone was asking if they wish to pursue the career in sports psychology, what would they need to do? He's tuning in from India.
Oh, welcome. Want to do my post-graduation in sports psychology. The thing is that in India, there's no specialized postgraduate degrees in sports psychology. Really, there's no specialized postgraduate degrees in the whole of India. That is a shame. Okay, that is a shame. Well, unfortunately, for Devasish, hope you don't mind, I'll call you Deva. For Deva, I think if you're looking for a specialized postgraduate degree in sports psychology and there isn't one in India, either look for an international one online, because I'm sure there are some, or you've got to go abroad, my friend. I know there's a couple in the UK which are offering online masters and postgraduate diplomas in sports psychology, which you can study from home. I'm sure there are in other countries as well. Or what a lot of people do is they just go abroad for their postgraduate studies. Maybe when the COVID situation is a bit better, maybe you want to look into that. But there's always things that you can study from home or buy books on. You need not necessarily get a postgraduate degree to boost up your knowledge. There's plenty of good knowledge available in books, plenty of good knowledge available in online books as well. Online source
And
materials, there's
sometimes
plenty.
there are webinars as well that are
Yeah,
specifically for different elements of the overall sports aspect these days. I
yeah,
know that some associations or different things, federations, I
yeah,
should say, are
yeah,
talking about these things. So there'll be
yeah,
webinars out there. So maybe can look into that as well. Because
yeah,
most people will be webinar based at the moment. Um,
definitely. Or online course based. It's,
yeah.
you know,
So
yeah,
maybe that's an area that,
yeah.
Google works, man.
But even for Deva as well, like for 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 sports psychology as a practice, you need not necessarily only think that a sports psychology program is the best thing that can help you, because there's so many things outside of a sports psychology program that can help. Like for example, if you started learning more about therapeutic methods or communication skills, or even a postgraduate program in applied psychology itself, that will still help you if you're wanting to become a sports psychologist as well. Because this again comes down to a lot of the mistakes that we made in our profession. We were so driven just looking at the performance side that we forgot how to do the real psychology part about connecting with humans and understanding the world from their view and helping them develop their self-awareness. And that kind of thing was missed out. So any kind of postgraduate psychology program which involves you connecting with people, that will definitely help you if you're looking to do sports psychology later on, for sure.
Awesome. I hope that answered your question. I mean, like I said, you can explore what's out there, and you can do different elements rather than an entire degree, as and when. Because I mean, obviously, present situation, things are changing. You have to look at it from a different perspective. Um, uh, okay, I was going to talk about, um, let's say, an athlete's cycle, life cycle, as it were, and the different situations. But I think I would like to look at Noriza. Noriza? Noriza?
Nuriza Osman.
Yeah. Oh my god, today our communication's failing. Carry on. I promise you I've
Any
not
tips?
had any gin and tonic today. Okay, just putting it out there.
Today,
Okay.
what about yesterday?
Shh, shh. We ain't talking about last night, my friend.
This is how we're
Yes.
surviving lockdown.
Yeah, man. Not
Any
that I'm
tips on
advocating any
preparing?
of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Any tips on preparing emerging athletes mental strategy? Okay, Nuriza, thank you very much for your question. That's an interesting question. It's quite open, so I'll try and answer it as best as I can. So for an emerging athlete, I'm not exactly sure what an emerging athlete would be,
A
but I'm
young
guessing someone,
athlete. Yeah,
the young
beginning of their career or
amateur athlete. Yeah, I would say that for the individual, I would think that they definitely need to develop some self-awareness. This for me is always going to be the big thing. Self-awareness on how their mentality affects their performances and in their training and their approach to said sport. So for me, that would be a key one. So that would involve reflecting on their performances, what went well, what didn't go well, why it didn't go well, how did I feel, what can I do better for next time? And especially for juniors, the more reflective they are, the better they're going to be. 100%, I'm sure about that. The more reflective you are, the better you're going to be. So that's what I would put on there. In terms of their preparation before performances, it's always good to have a good set routine in there where they can sort of feel in the emotional state that they want to feel in, where they're feeling in control, where they're feeling confident, where they're looking at the kind of things that they can achieve in their performances. That for me would always be crucial. So what I would suggest for Nariza is, if you want some more details on that, I would look at getting like a mental skills handbook. There'd be more specific tips on there. I'd always say that mental skills training comes down to 5 skills as well. Psychological skills. So the first one would be self-talk. What am I thinking and when am I thinking about it? Because your thinking patterns are very important. The second one would be your visualization or your imagery. What kind of images am I seeing and how am I preparing mentally for my performances using this? Your third one would be breathing exercises to relax or energize yourself. So that'll bring about feelings of control and less stress, or it can boost up your energy as well. Your fourth one would be setting the right kind of goals, the right kind of goals in your training, mid-term, short-term, long-term, all of that, to make sure that you're on track, and make sure that if you do miss your goal, how you're reevaluating. And the fifth one would be your concentration. Where is your mind going to, and when is it going to? So any kind of psychological preparation should be based on those kind of 5 things. So I hope that answers your questions.
And also the ability to communicate the following. I think the self-awareness is good, but if they cannot articulate it, or they don't have the emotional language
Yes.
available to them, you can, but yes, having that underlying, encouraging them to be able to talk about what they're going through, or how was your swim, what did you notice about this, and I know I keep going back to swimming, but all those things,
Yeah.
encourage, basically, it's encouraging them to use the language that, we call it emotional language, able to identify the different emotions and things like that, and that in turn encourages the whole self-awareness thing, right? Being able and encouraged to say, yeah,
Yeah.
I felt like this, or yeah, or anything like that, and
Yeah.
giving them the tools in which to do any of this. It starts from
Yeah.
young, actually. Um,
It does, yeah. And I'd give one bit of advice on this, because sometimes people get a little bit stuck and they get frustrated with this. Stay patient with it. If you ask yourself these kind of questions and you get stuck, don't panic. Keep asking, keep searching, keep reflecting. The answers will come. And the better you get at reflecting, honestly, it's going to make a world of difference. Then you will at least have the foundations of when you can change and how you can get better. Especially junior athletes, unfortunately, when they get kind of stuck and then they stop reflecting and they stop being self-aware, you'll start to see that the performances will drop. And at any kind of level, you need to know what went well, what didn't go well, so you can know how you progress from there. It's not the end of the world if you mess up a performance, but you got to learn from that, and then that will redirect you. Okay, this didn't go well this time. Here's what I'm going to do to fix it, and then you'll build up your confidence that way. That, oh, you know what, I did exactly what I needed to do. I'm better prepared this time, and then that
and
will help them.
sometimes, like we were talking last week, you may swim a perfect race, but someone else just happens to swim just a little bit, more perfect, if you like. And that's how do you roll with these kind of situations? The idea of not faulting yourself uh, when you just did everything right. And sometimes that's how it is, right? You might lose the race, or you just don't, you know, and being able to handle that, or be able to step back and say, yeah, okay, I did everything I could have done. That's the way it is, right? And like you were saying, having that self-awareness to be able to take that step back and go, okay, I did everything to that, but someone else just did that a little bit differently.
Yeah.
if you like, and take away from that. I think that's one of the hardest things. Yeah, learning to accept, you know, it's okay to fail or to be outtouched or not win everything or not PB every single race or, whatever the situation is, because that's
You see,
the nature of sport or
Lee,
life.
I'd go one further than that. It's not just okay to fail. It's necessary. It's necessary. It's necessary. You have to fail. You have to mess up because you don't learn and get better otherwise. Every great performer you looked at will have horrendous periods in their career where they messed up badly. And then
Yeah, and then how do you deal with that? How do you, if you've never failed, how do you know anything about yourself too?
you know, otherwise
Um,
just stay at home and do nothing, then you won't fail. Stay home
no,
and do nothing. Never try, never fail.
I think that's what my kids use to not tidy their room. It's like, yeah, it's only going to get messy again, Mum. No. Um,
Exactly.
I know
Just
they don't
lock
listen to
that
this, so it's
monkey.
fine. Um, I think, yeah, having that, yeah, it's part and parcel of how life is, right? It's
Yeah,
and also that, coming back to the present situation, where we may not necessarily be able to get to our chosen sport and train, or the whole our usual way of doing things with the COVID situation and everything else. And this is where I think it has also drawn in more of the conversation about mental health in athletes, and not just in athletes, in general, is that there's never been such a time where um, the whole situation is like, I'm not going to be able to train, I'm not going to be able to race. Uh, so now what? What do you? Is bringing about that whole conversation is, how do you help your athletes, or those under your care, to keep them motivated, or keep them, keep a closer eye on them, because there would be a greater sense of isolation in this present time, because before you had your teammates, you had more of your support network, uh,
yeah,
literally around you, and
yeah,
now, um, less of that. How would you? I don't want to say recommend. I mean, what are your own observations of the whole situation, and how would you, if someone approached you and said, how do you help them cope, is probably
yeah,
uh, the
yeah.
way.
Uh, this is a really interesting question because there's so many ways to approach this. And for example, like there's a big gap. There's a big gap between the younger generations and older generations. Because of our life experiences. So the way that we handle these kind of situations is naturally going to be different because the life experiences are. So, for example, many years ago, where there may or may not have been lockdowns, or there may or may not have been other viruses coming around, or there may not have been other calamities like world wars and things. This is a procedure which a lot have experienced before. So it's like, okay, we're kind of used to this. Or for some people in different lines of work, or for some people with different personalities where they don't mind being alone or in their rooms, it's easier for them. But for a lot of athletes, where they're coming in and suddenly they're shut off, it can be quite difficult to kind of deal with and handle. So the first thing that I would say is just try to accept this situation. Doesn't mean that life is terrible, that life is bad. Life is still full of a lot of good things. There's a lot of bad things that happen, and this is a period where we're at the moment. And just because you can't do the things that you like to do doesn't mean that you're not going to progress, or it doesn't mean that your life's over. It doesn't mean that your career is going to be over. So, for example, what I would suggest is to the individuals, when you're thinking about all the things that you can't do, try to think about the things that you can do. I once made a recommendation to an athlete I was working with before. They kept training and they kept training and they weren't progressing. I was just like, look, why don't you just take a break? Why don't you just work on yourself and come back fresher to your sport as a different person? Then when you actually train, you'll actually start to see improvements. And they did that. They just stepped away for 3 months. And the three
Yeah.
months of not doing the sport helped them more than just carrying on for 3 months and not progressing in the
And then
sport and
getting
just
more
getting frustrated.
frustrated and,
Yeah,
you know, and but that's the thing, right? I think it's more so if your whole life is wrapped around something, and it is the training and the whole thing and the competing and the, you know, everything else, and where to step away from that for a period of time and say, no, just chill, you know, take a break,
be difficult.
try something else. You know, it is a hard thing to do. I think as an athlete as well, it's like, what do you mean stop training? That's like, you know, um, although some people might like go, yeah, stop training, but you know, completely different approach, of
Yeah,
course. But
it can be a hard message. It can be a hard one to expect, especially because athletes are so used to being driven and they're in that kind of habit of training. So it's a bit like, okay, there might be a different strategy which might help me right now. Maybe I'm a bit resistant towards it, but it might be good for me. But even coming back to the conversation of mental health, if an athlete only sees himself as an athlete, I'm just an athlete and that's it. That can be highly problematic because it's not the truth. You are
when
many
they
different things.
retire, that's when you see that whole,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
that's all I've been. Does that mean that's it? Am I, you know, we
Now
were
my
talking
life's
about
over because
this.
I'm not competing anymore.
Yeah, which I
Problematic.
think we was it Michael Phelps had said that, and quite a few other, like Ian Thorpe, when they stopped.
Totally lost. No
Yeah,
direction. What am I doing in
what
my
am I
day?
doing
Like,
now?
oh, yeah, horrible,
What?
horrible. So especially what young athletes need to get in mind is as well, and older ones, and everybody really diversify your portfolio. Take up other interests. Be good at other things. Remember that you're more than just an athlete. You might be a son or a daughter, or a brother or a sister or a friend, or you might have interest in other things. These are the kind of things that's really going to help you. And what I found is as well for athletes who are handling this situation better since Corona's kicked off are those ones who have taken up other hobbies or they've started to do other things. It's going to make a massive difference because it
It
helps the time go by.
strengthens
Yeah,
you, right? And
yeah,
not just from a physical point of view.
yeah,
It you realize that, yeah, you don't have to be one thing, right? You're not one dimensional.
yeah.
Um,
And it might make you a better performer. Doing things outside of your sport might make you a better performer if you're feeling more calm, if you're feeling more confident, if you're feeling more rounded as a person. Why would that not make you a better performer? Of course it will. And we see lots and lots of examples of this all over across the world in lots of different sports. Like, say, like for example, Muhammad Ali was a great boxer. He wasn't just a boxer; he was plenty of things, and that definitely helped his boxing without a doubt.
I mean, I think it's very easy to forget this. We always talk about every show. We talk about food because, yeah, food is important. We love food. It's part of recovery. Um, but yeah, it tends to, it can get lost by the wayside because you get so wrapped. It is very easy to get in that cycle of, okay,
Yeah,
training. When's my next race? This is, you know, da 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 da. And in between that,
yeah.
um, you can lose sight of, well, at
Oh
some
yeah,
stage you will retire,
yeah,
uh, or touch with, you know, injury or whatever. Sometimes injury makes them also. I mean, you know, obviously COVID was the big kicker in reevaluating things, but you know, injury sometimes make them take a step back and go, well, okay, so how, you know, what am I going to do, you know? And sometimes it gives them a taste of what's going to happen when my, you know, the end of my career, because it's going to happen at some stage or another, right?
it's
um
gonna happen, and you want to transition gracefully, peacefully. That's the ideal situation where you're kind of at peace with the transition, not where it just happens unexpectedly and you don't know what to do. And as well for athletes as well, they got to remember that the kind of skills that you develop in sport are going to be so useful for you in other areas. Being driven and being motivated and performing, these are skills which are useful everywhere. So it's good to think about these kind of things early on and prepare. And it helps so much with your maturity as well. If you can think that far ahead, you're definitely going to be more mature. You're going to be able to know what's good for you and what's bad for you. You're going to know how to plan and set things out. You're going to know how to adapt. You're going to know how to make critical decisions and think critically as well. So having those other interests and thinking about life after sport is always going to be good for you, and it will make you actually enjoy what you're doing as well sometimes.
And because you appreciate it for what it
Yeah, and
is,
that's what's great
right?
for mental health.
Because what we say? Yeah, last week we were talking about this with Daniel. Yeah, no, not 2 weeks ago. Sorry, and he had mentioned that he had to take a break after one of the major meets, and he just completely just shut it off, rather than you know one of the with his obviously with knowledge now. He said if he had just kept in touch with the training aspect, just lighter, but still get the feel in rather than completely this. And then
Yeah,
when you try to come back, you've taken six, whatever time frame it is, um, and then the frustration comes about as opposed to, you know. Um, so we had talked about being aware that you're going to retire at some point. It may not seem like that when you're 13, 14, or whatever, time frame it is. But yeah, you're going to um, stop swimming as much. You can actually swim lifelong intent. Um, but a lot of it is yeah, a lot of times you're not aware of it, and I think sometimes parents or their coaches as well play a role in this whole not say being diverse, but making sure that they are aware that you're not just this, you're not just winner of medals, you're not just this.
yep,
um, we used to do that during off season, do different things. I think kids these days tend to have less of an off season than previously, but well, this whole year seems to be quite off season.
depends
um,
on the sport as well. Depends on the
yeah.
sport.
And they always encouraged us to do different things. We learned, kayak and swim in the sea, and you play water polo, or you do whatever it is, and that I think made a difference for a lot of us, because, like you said, you're not just one thing. You're not
Yeah,
just that. Um,
yep.
uh, I think Lenny was asking something about mental exercises somewhere. Yes.
Yes. Oh, Linny, again, thank you for your question again. Yes, Linny, if you have been watching, I think I covered that a little bit earlier on about specific mental exercises. So I'll just go over them again. For mental skills training, I would always come to those five, which were thinking about your thinking patterns, thinking about the images that you see. There we go. Breathing exercises to calm down or boost up your energy. Thinking about the goals that you're setting, either for your training or for your career, for the next year, however long, and learning how to focus. Where's my focus going? How can I control my focus? What's a distraction? What's not a distraction? And all of this is wrapped up in self-awareness as well. So that's a good place to start. There's plenty of good books out there. If you want to get more info on the specific types of those exercises,
You can go to your page.
yeah, you can
Yeah.
go to my pages as well, wherever they are. You can get some info from there, no problem.
Uh,
Lots
I'll
of
just
things
quickly
there.
bring that up. Yeah. This is Mama's page. There are some elements there, and I guess they can also reach out to you if they have further questions as well.
Yes, you're most
Um,
welcome. Please do.
and you can talk about food too.
Talking about food. No.
We always talk about food. Come on.
No.
Yeah, we're
Psychology only,
Malaysian,
please. No
so
food
yeah,
chat.
food.
Hopefully, when the virus is over, you can talk psychology over food. There we go.
Yeah. See,
That's
in the
my
camp,
favorite.
more relaxed.
Yeah, any UK food that I miss, only fish and chips. Because I'm saying this because the fish and chips in Malaysia is just not as good as the fish and chips back home. It's a good try, but it doesn't quite cut it. And I'm sure Leah's brother agrees with me because he spent a lot of time in the UK.
All my older two siblings are still there, so
Oh, they. Oh, there
they're
you
there.
go.
Yeah,
I know they agree with me. I know it for a fact.
it's different, man.
But they don't have nasi lemak in the UK, so it's
Yeah.
fair.
Oh, there'll be different elements that you miss, right? It's cheese.
Cheese.
Lots
Lots
of
of cheese in
cheese,
the UK.
man.
Lots of cheese, yes, definitely.
That don't cost an arm and a leg.
An arm and a leg, yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
and
Here we have cheese on your fish and chips. There you go. Even better.
yeah. Are you a salt and vinegar man for your
Yes.
chips?
Yeah.
Ah,
Why not?
I don't know if this is like psychology questions, it's like brown sauce to ketchup kind of, you know,
It
thing.
doesn't say
But
anything about my personality, if that's what you mean. I just like salt and vinegar. It
it's
doesn't
just,
mean I'm a
you
sour
know,
person or something.
people always, are you like salt and vinegar man? You just like this, or like you like what you like? It's like
You
okay,
like what you like.
maybe
That's it.
today maybe I feel like salt and vinegar. Maybe it's just salt on my chips or
Why not?
ketchup or brown sauce or
Why not?
curry or
Chin chai lah.
red teen Thai. Yes, very good. Buzzfeed's good though. Um, I mean, coming back to yeah, get just see. We always talk about food, and that would be the rest of our day. Buzzfeed, yeah, Buzzfeed quiz. What's the difference between? Um, so come back. I mean, in this talking about mental health, of course, in this present lifetime, in the last decade. Yes, Linny, she's one of my eating buddies. We always talk about food. And obviously with social media, the growth of social media and a lot of top athletes, especially, or any level, you would have a different set of pressures added to not just your performance, but you will have people expect you to have a social media presence and being able to communicate with fans or those sort of things and obviously if someone does you know you can see especially in the last few years like if social media goes against you then you comes back to this whole cyberbullying thing and how do you I mean it's a component that is added in these days to consider
Yep.
because it is such an integral. Oh, look at us! We're obviously using the platform ourselves right now,
Yes.
and something that how would you not say prepare them or would it be something that you would work with them as well in terms of being able to handle because there's always going to be naysayers or someone who just likes to say things just good right or whatever it is and if it becomes tied into the performance aspect or how would you not say help them cope I mean I keep saying that but
No, no, there's nothing wrong with that because cyberbullying is just a form of stress. It's just a particular form of stress, something that's not particularly nice. That's all. Um, and negative comments, unfortunately, are the bane of life. Unfortunately, there's
you're
a
gonna get it in real life too um,
yeah, you're gonna get it in real life. Like there's a famous sports psychologist from the States who gave a conference, I think in the last year, and he was saying, from an evolutionary perspective, years and years and years ago, we were scared of saber-toothed tigers and this and this. Now we're just scared about negative comments. This is the modern day saber-tooth tiger is a negative comment. So it's something which definitely needs to be addressed. And I would always say to individuals that just try to prepare in terms of just expect these to come because unfortunately, negative comments will come no matter how good you are. I always say as well that even Jesus Christ had haters, you know.
yeah it's like
Even Jesus had haters, It's gonna come. It's gonna come. So try not to let it get to you too much. And if it does get to you, try to use that in a useful way. If it does make you upset, use that as motivation to come back and get better. But don't take it too personally. And I would never take criticism from someone that I wouldn't get advice from. If I don't go to you for advice and you criticize me, I'm not going to take it. So that's just
especially with a lot of time they do not know you right
yeah,
Yeah, because it's
And
easy
unfortunately, people are
to
so
say, right?
insecure. People are so insecure in themselves, unfortunately, that they feel the need to go onto social media and do this kind of thing to whack other people and say negative things about them. If they were more secure in themselves, they probably wouldn't do that. Because there's nothing really wrong with criticism. Criticism's a good thing, depending on how you deliver it. You know, you just say, let's say, for example, Leah, you did a performance which I wasn't very happy with, and I'm a big fan of you. Say, I'm just going on your Instagram page and say, Leah, you know what? I believe you can do better than that. You did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. But if you know, just change a couple of things, I think you can do it. That's criticism. You might feel better reading that than rather than saying, "Oh, Leah, you're absolute dog shit. Quit now." You know, what kind
Yeah,
of
it's
that?
it comes down to the whole communication thing, doesn't it? How you
So
say something and how you respond to something, and
yeah,
oh, it's easy to because especially the anonymity of the screen
social
and
media.
the
Oh yeah,
yeah
keyboard
and
warriors.
yeah um you can take a step back and say, okay, maybe they did say something that I can take away and be of
Yeah,
use.
yeah, yeah.
Or, if they say, you suck and I don't like you anymore, and you're like, yeah, okay, we can. But,
But I
obviously
always say
that
to
comes with the maturity or
yeah,
being able to step back and say,
but
self
if I
awareness, right?
yeah if I was like a natural swimmer and someone said that to me on my social media feed, I would just be like, okay, then you put your trunks on. I want to see how well you do.
Yeah.
You want to take my spot? You want to live my life? No, okay,
Come
be
here.
quiet. Just be quiet. But I think it really helps to look to try to accept people as fallible human beings. Stay rational with it. People are not perfect. You know,
I like that.
unfortunately,
I'll use that next time.
people have plenty of flaws, and unfortunately, this is one way that people show their flaws. And if you just try to accept it and use it in a way that's useful for you. I mean, negative emotions are not particularly a problem per se, as long as they're healthy. You know, there's a
Because you're
difference
going to
between
feel them. You're going to,
oh yeah, oh
part
yeah,
and parcel, as it
oh
were.
yeah, and from a mental health perspective as well. There was a big push, I think, particularly in the last 20 years, 10 years, to try to never feel negative, and it's not realistic. Sadness and anxiety, this part and parcel of human life, but use that in a way that's helpful for you. So when your anxiety is healthy and you're a bit nervous before a competition, okay, great. It might actually help you focus better. When it gets to that unhealthy level and you're shaking and you're paranoid, okay, now we need to kind of address this. So keep your negative emotions healthy, use them to your advantage. Even if there are comments online, use it to your advantage and just get better from there and just keep going on your way and don't get too distracted by them. Just acknowledge it, accept it, and move on.
Because I was, one of my lecturers many eons ago, we won't say how many eons ago, uh,
Enough years ago.
enough years ago, um, and we were talking. Obviously, well, I did English Lit and history as my degree, and what they had said was we were talking about a particular novel and book, and he said, and what he had said is you must acknowledge the emotion you feel,
Yeah.
um, because if you don't acknowledge, you don't deal.
No, keep coming back to you
It'll
regardless.
keep coming, and then
Yeah.
it's. I think the analogy they were using it's like wearing away at you. It
Oh yeah.
starts eating at you, whereas you can acknowledge the negative, uh, and but not let it become all consuming. On the opposite scale, where you only right it takes over. You can acknowledge that, and then okay, I
Yeah.
acknowledge this is how I'm feeling. Da da da. Next, right? Next, because I think sometimes they always say, "All right, deal with it," right? It's not necessarily like you have to acknowledge that this is the way you're feeling. This is okay. Some days you're gonna like, oh man, I'm having a crappy day. I feel like this, and other days you're like, okay, cool, we're cool. And like I said, you're gonna have. I mean, the higher up or the more famous you are, you're gonna get the whole range of attempts at communication that count as comments. Um, so acknowledge, or acknowledge that okay, maybe I can take something away. Maybe I learned something from reading these comments or even people that you meet.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes the more well known you are or the higher level you are, some people feel that they can just tell you anything and it's okay. Because
Yeah.
either you're a public figure or anything, then they can tell you, like, you suck, man. Um, and, you know, like I said, it's the self awareness. And you have to be able to acknowledge the negative, but not let it take over. I think that's the hard. It's always about balance, right? Always talk about balance in the force.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely, it's all about balance. Like they're gonna come regardless. They're gonna come for all kinds of reasons. So just learning to accept with it and deal with it in a way that's healthy for you, and try not to run away from negative emotions per se. Depending on what kind of strategies you want to use. Like I said, from a cognitive behavioral standpoint, which is a kind of chosen therapy or coaching tools that I use, there's different ways of dealing with that. There's either, you kind of switch that negative thing to a positive thing. That could be one way. There could be a way of, okay, that thing seems really, really negative. Can I make it less negative in my mind? So it's still negative, but not as annoying. That's another way. Or another way could be just, for example, just, okay, if it's negative, bear with the negative thing, experience that emotion, and still carry on as you are. So, and depending on how you want to deal with it, it's up to you. But that's always the kind of advice I would give, is that these things are going to come regardless. You can't really run away from it. So, unfortunately,
because
I pity those
the
kind of people who do
human,
that online.
yeah, I mean, the human mind is unpredictable. I guess that would be the right. You never know how you
You never know what
react.
people are going to comment.
Yeah, man.
Never
Like,
know.
my nasi lemak is better than your nasi lemak, and
Okay,
you
good.
know,
I'll come and try it one day.
I just go to the local shop and then yeah. Um,
More power to you.
yeah, man. It's yeah when yeah because sometimes I mean I always say this to those who are under my watch. Oh, that's a controversial statement right there. Is that learning how to communicate is a very important thing, and it is a skill that, especially the younger ones, that it's not just learning to talk about, you know, um, the self awareness and that side of things is also learning to communicate with those around you. And if you think your career is going to be here,
Yeah.
and you're going to have to deal with people, and sometimes you will deal with people that you need to count to 10 quite often. And
That's a relaxation strategy there. Breathe.
yeah, breathe.
There we go. There's a mental skill
Yeah,
there.
and
Thank you. Yeah.
being able to handle how do you communicate them, the way in which you communicate, and
Yep.
especially online, because I was telling them it just takes one one misstep, and it can be a little one, and sometimes it comes to that, but you're trying to drum into them. Yes, you might feel the emotion, but not necessarily. Learning how to communicate online and with people around you is also very important. Not just your own self, right? Your own, and it tends to be a
Yeah.
neglected skill, I find.
Well, our
Um,
communication is changing, isn't it, Leah? Because we're becoming more and more tech savvy. So, I've seen athletes when they do get cyberbullying and negative comments. I've seen them just argue with the people back, and that's, I mean,
that's a losing battle right there. Then you
yeah,
get
yeah.
then you get all caught up, and then
Yeah,
and then
and
that's it.
some other athletes as well, they just disable the function. No comments allowed. Some do that as well. So there's different practical ways of handling these kind of situations. It's depending on whatever's comfortable for the individual athlete. But yeah, we do need to learn how to communicate. And I think with a lot of athletes as well, where they're using social media because they are public figures, or they're using social media because this is now the age that we live in. Learning how to portray yourself online and learning how to manage these kind of situations
Handle
is really,
certain
really
situations,
important.
yeah.
Yeah,
Which
really
also
important.
ties into why the next week we'll be looking at. I mean, mental health is very big, phrase, but from the athlete's point of view. We have a present national athlete, as well as a former national athlete, my brother. We'll be having that conversation next week. As
Oh,
well.
I'm going to tune into that. Jeff's got loads of good stuff about this.
Yeah, and
Loads of good stuff.
Jing En is a present national athlete who started a conversation about her own, I'd say, struggles with some mental health issues, or the fact that we don't always talk about it, you know, as especially as national athletes. So that will be a nice tie-in till next week that we want to talk about.
Yes, it's going to be a good one, I'm
So
sure.
yeah. Do we have any other questions that I want to deal with? Other than, are you a sambal on the side person, or are you like banjir, throwing all the sambal onto your nasi lemak kind of situation?
I
It's like
don't put the
psychology
sambal.
question. Is it like,
I don't put the sambal on the nasi lemak. I leave it separate. And if I want a little bit, I'll take a little bit.
oh, we haven't conditioned you enough, I think. Mix it all in.
You can take the Brit out of Britain. You can't take the Britain out of the Brit.
Yeah, I think we will wind it down.
Okay, sure. Unless there's any other questions.
Today. Spicy or non-spicy?
I don't mind spicy food. Spicy is good to go. Non-spicy is good to go. I'm okay with anything.
As long as it's food, man. As long as it tastes good. Whatever.
Exactly. Be grateful for every morsel that you get.
It's a good time to talk, I think that's part of it, acknowledging the negative, as well as learning to see, okay, I can still do this, right? You were saying you can still, realizing that I can still do my workout. I can still communicate with my team or my coaches through this kind of methods, and that's I think sometimes it's not so easy to see that side of it, especially when you do feel that sense of isolation, and I haven't seen my teammates in ages, or my coach, and so that's something that I think this year is a good time to work on things,
It
whether it's
is, and we learn a lot.
ourselves.
Yeah,
You learn a lot about yourself, I tell you.
we learn a lot. And even social distancing really means physical distancing. Doesn't mean that you're less social. It just means that you don't stand in front of people without a mask. That's all it means.
Yeah.
Call people, text people, video call people. Stay connected. We have the means and the tools.
Reflect.
Yes,
I
there's
like
plenty
that.
of things that we can do. Plenty of things. It's not the end of the world.
Nope, it's in evolution, if you like, of how things will be. And
Can you imagine a world after lockdown, how we're going to react to everything? Where we're just going to be like so appreciative, like being able to go out and eat with calm and without thinking about, oh my God, that person just coughed, have they got the virus? Can you imagine what that's going to be like?
I don't know. I mean, I think because humans get used to things so quickly, or not, and depending on the person, but you do get used to this. Now you go out, you're like, oh, do I have my mask on me? Do I have this? Right? It's you get used to doing things. So I think when we first were able, when they relaxed MCO a little bit, and you could go out like to the park, or when they opened the pools again, you go there, you're like, wait, it's a bit weird,
Yeah.
or you see your teammates again, even though we've been talking like this for, we would make it a conscious effort to do all those things. And then when you see each other physically, you're like, yeah, okay. We have that little awkward moment, or like, when they didn't open the pools yet, but they allowed us to travel interstate and we could go swim in the sea.
Yeah.
You felt like it's like, oh, and like breaking, like, I'll say like a criminal, but you're gonna, because you haven't
Is
been
this
able to go
okay?
out.
Am
Is
I
this
allowed to do
okay?
this?
Am I allowed to do this? And you're like, yeah, again. And you go swim, and you're like, okay, this is good. Oh, Daniel finally, he's always late. Mr. Bago. Daniel just signed on.
Hello.
Hey, we
Hello,
were
Daniel.
talking about
Hello.
you earlier.
How do you do,
Yeah,
sir? Welcome.
he was on earlier 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So yeah, we talked about you, Daniel, and he always does this. He always like comes in late. Yeah, so we should ask Daniel. You're nasi lemak. Yeah, he did say, bald men make better swimmers. Oh,
I don't know. I'm not a particularly good swimmer. I don't think I've got the whole breathing down. I think I can swim very quickly under one breath, but to turn and
you
breathe, and
see, it's a
I'm not that
time to
used to it.
learn new skills.
It is, but I can't get into a pool yet.
Oh, well, get one of those blow up things.
Ah, okay, okay.
Practice your
No, no,
breathing,
no.
man.
Oh, I tell you, okay, I can tell you how I can help my swimming without a pool. I can go online. I can search up the best techniques. I can make sure I memorize them. I can write them down. I can visualize myself doing it, so that I'm going to be much better prepared for when the pools do open. I'll be ahead of the game.
Exactly. Yeah,
I'll be ahead of the game. That's
and
what I
then
can do now.
you
Even if
can
it's this
come
much, I
swim
can
with
still do this
us.
much. Yes. Then I'll be better prepared. I'll know all the lingo and all the techniques and everything. I just got to
Yeah,
do
we'll
them.
sort you out, man.
You got to see. There's always something you can do, even if it's only that much. That much is still better than nothing.
Nothing. Okay, that will be your new skill for 2021, right?
It's a life skill. I need that. I need
Yeah,
that. Definitely, and I do like the water. It's just being in the water is a bit tricky, but I'll get there one day.
of course you will. Oh,
What is
that's what
Kolo Me? I
Kolomi
don't even know.
is one of Daniel's favorite. Well, it's a Sarakian dish of noodles and stuff. Daniel's be
Are the
like,
noodles
yeah,
and stuff?
yeah,
Sounds appetizing.
my ability to communicate today has been sorely lacking. Um,
Kolo
yeah,
Me.
that's
Oh wow,
Kolomi.
looks colorful.
It's
If that's
just
Sarawaki, I want to
yeah,
try it.
yeah,
I want
and
to try that.
yeah, we'll get Daniel to sort us out after
Masak lah,
interview.
bro.
Yeah,
Or we can
man.
go somewhere. No problem.
I'm still waiting to collect my birthday drink.
Is that coffee?
Yeah, it's coffee. That's what it is.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Happy birthday as well, whenever that was. When was your birthday?
May.
Hey, happy
Yeah,
belated.
thank
We're almost
you.
closer to your next birthday now.
I know, right? It's like, where has this year has gone, man? Okay,
Yes.
let's wind it down.
Let's wrap it up.
Thank you very much, Moa, for coming on today, and it was an excellent conversation, and hopefully
Yes.
more conversations we will have.
Inshallah. Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
A quick shout out to Azizul behind the screen, who is my awesome man. Awesome work as always. And to my sponsors, Finis Swimming Malaysia, Swim Shop to You, Real Out Play, as well as PTC Outdoor. You can get, yay, discount! Always like that. 10%. Swim Shop to You, the code is Dubums, and for PTC Outdoor, it is CPL Sports. And thank you. You guys take care, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye. Bye, Leah.
everyone.
Bye.